Joining us now is Cyrus Walker. He's the managing principal of Data Defenders, a data protection cybersecurity firm. Cyrus, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
You know, when it comes to cybersecurity, what makes voting systems vulnerable to an attack or a breach, and what should the government be trying to do to implement or to mitigate those risks, rather?
Well, there are two things that make electronic voting systems vulnerable to the risks that exist out there today. The first is the fact that they're electronic machines now, or computers, basically, that run on operating systems with code that have been developed by companies to facilitate the ballot casting, vote tallying, and results production process. The second thing, and this is probably the biggest thing that makes them vulnerable, is the interconnectivity between the various components, and particularly the internet. Malicious actors exist on the internet primarily. Now, you also have to consider the threat from internal actors in the organization, but they are not as prevalent and as potent as the threat from the malicious actors that exist from nation-state countries, for instance. So the combination of the code that runs these systems and the internet connectivity is what makes them vulnerable and what really makes cybersecurity a major concern for electronic voting systems today.
Yeah, and has been for some time. I'm sure you've seen the PSA, the FBI and the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency released a PSA earlier this month saying that malicious cyber activity is unlikely to disrupt or prevent voting at this very critical time. But people have concerns, valid concerns about their votes actually counting. Is there anything you can say to ensure people out there that their votes will count?
Well, yes. So cybersecurity is an active and ongoing concern for any enterprise-based system, and particularly for critical infrastructure like electronic voting systems. With that said, election jurisdiction officials around the country now realize the critical nature of these systems and the extreme importance to ensure that these systems are secure. So what they've done, especially since 2016, is have stepped up their cybersecurity programmatic development and implementation efforts to ensure that they can identify the risks associated with the various components of an electronic voting system and have put in place countermeasures to ensure that they can actively monitor and mitigate any threats against these systems. So using technologies like managed detection and response to identify network-based threats that are attempting to attack internet-connected voting system components, or doing things like code review to ensure that the code that are running these systems is the code that's supposed to be on these systems. Doing pre-usage system checks. In the industry, it's called pre-lat checks, which basically is a process that each election jurisdiction official uses to test out the system before they actually deploy it into the field of the precincts. So those are a number of things that are done. But what the voters should understand is that the federal government and state government go through extensive testing to ensure that these systems operate the way that they've been proposed to operate. And so we call those certification checks. And no electronic voting system can be used in an election jurisdiction until it has completed both the federal certification and the state certification. So there are a number of things that happen before a system actually gets deployed into the field to be used by a voter to cast and tally their votes.
Yeah, there's some pretty critical races taking place across the country come November 8th. Cyrus Walker, managing principal of Data Defenders, thank you so much for your time, and especially thank you for your insight.
You're welcome.